July 28th, 1914, the First World War would break out. It would rage on till November 11th, 1918, and the Western Front would become absolute hell on Earth. Trench warfare, which seemed like a military science, would prove to be nothing more than a living nightmare. Living in a moist, dark, rat infested subterranean environment, not knowing if the shells exploding over your head contain poison gas or not, or if you'd be able to get your gas mask on fast enough. You couldn't look over the trenches without getting shot at, and at night, if you were able to peek over and get a glimpse of the sights when someone fired a flare gun to see if there was an incoming attack, you would be treated to the sight of dirt, mud, blood, craters, tangled barbed wire, and mutilated dead bodies. The Western Front of World War I was truly the scariest environment imaginable. It was a living hell in pretty much every way you can think of. And it was sadly a horrible reality for the men of the First World War. In 1928, a story would come out published in a German magazine written by a World War I survivor, All Quiet on the Western Front. It says the greatest war novel of all time. I'm not going to dispute that. This book is a pulled no punches, dark account of life in the trenches and the war. A new version of the movie just came, a new adaptation just came out. I held off on seeing it till November 11th, and I'm telling you, the movie was a horrifying masterpiece. This movie captured the horror, the hellscape of the Western Front. When there's a scene in the trenches where we have characters standing in knee-high water in the cold, scooping water out of the trenches with their helmet. We see the rats, the mud, the blood. Our main character forges parliamentary permission slips and goes in with his friends, and his friends just get killed as the war goes on. This movie dehumanizes people, which is what war does. There's a scene when a dugout our characters are in the trench is getting shelled, and our characters are in a dugout. His one friend goes to run out, and this film has haunting scenes that will stick with you. His friend runs out, a shell lands, and his body's gone. The next day, when they dig him out, he's covered in dirt, mud, he's probably sore all over, and someone's like, "Oh, you're okay," hands him a bag, "Now start collecting dog tags." And as he's doing it, we hear a crunch, and his friend had these broken glasses, and he actually, instead of the arms, he had string, like this fabric, holding them on. He finds the glasses, and he doesn't even have time to mourn. He goes on with his job. There's one scene I found particularly haunting. They're in this area, and someone could tell by the smell poison gas was used here. They go into this room, and it's just piled with dead soldiers, and someone mentioned they took their masks off too soon. There's an assault scene where they go to capture some territory, and for those of you that don't know, because of the trenches, this war was a big stalemate with very little ground gathered either way. They take the trenches, and They actually get into the kitchen and they start eating, and then you see just a ton of rats run and the earth start to shake, and there's a tank assault. And they made these primitive World War I tanks to be absolutely horrifying. This is another scene that just, it sticks with me. They can't do much against these tanks. If they get close, they can throw a grenade in the tread and disable them. But as the tanks come to the trenches, we see one of the German soldiers, and yeah, this was written by a German survivor, and it's from the German perspective, which I'm glad the movie kept. We see him get brutally crushed under the tread of the tanks, and as they retreat, the flamethrower troops come in, and again, these flamethrowers, horrifying is the only word to describe the scene where they're used, as they're just burning people alive. One of his friends gets hit with the flamethrower, and even when he's on the ground, you have people with rifles still shooting at him, only they're not shooting to kill. They're shooting him in like the leg and the arm. They're prolonging his suffering, and it is just, like I said, it pulls no punches with the horror that life in the trenches was. This film delivered on what 1917 didn't. That being said, I think the new All Quiet on the Western Front and 1917, you can easily view Western Front as a sequel to 1917. They're great companion pieces. I actually tried to watch 17 after Western Front, but it was just too, I needed something more light after this movie. I couldn't go into another dark war movie, which just says something about the power of the film. At one point, we see something that pays off later. One of his friends and him, they're stealing from a farmer. When we get to the point where the armistice is signed and it's peace and hours, they steal some eggs. The farmer's son shoots his friend, and when he gets him to a doctor, this is another one of the haunting scenes that'll stick with you. The doctor just examines, and it's just how casual and nonchalant the doctor is about, he's dead. Like it ain't no big deal, because he's seen so much death and he's been so desensitized to death. And the scene I think is the most haunting and the one that sticks with me the most. Our main character stabs a soldier. They're in a crater, and he shoves mud in his mouth because he can't stand the sound of this guy whimpering as he's dying. Then he realizes how inhumane he's being to a dying man, and he tries to give him water, and he's like, you're my comrade, and he's trying to comfort him, and he pulls something out of his uniform, and it's a picture of the guy's wife and kids. Our main character took a father away from a child and a husband away from a wife. The dehumanizing aspects of war. Tragically, the most sad scene, there's an attack launched 15 minutes before the ceasefire. And this is the point where I'm actually tearing up because of all these people that are going to die. And spoiler for the end, but if you know the book, you know the main character doesn't make it through, even though his death is different. He makes it to the trench, gets into a tussle with a German soldier. They fall down into a dugout, and there's a scene where they're just staring at each other, and you're like, it's got to be close to 15 minutes. If they just stay there, both of them will live, because at this point, you don't want either one of these people to die, because it's almost peacetime, and this final assault is just meant to satisfy a general's ego, and another soldier just stabs him from behind with a bayonet, and like 3 seconds after he gets stabbed, 11 o'clock, ceasefire! And literally, they just go from tearing each other's throats out to ceasefire, and it's over. It's, again, a haunting scene that stays with you as he walks out and just looks at the world now at peace, still in the hellscape that is the trenches. And we see another German soldier collecting dog tags and finds his dead body. I give this film an A plus. It pulls no punches. It's the brutal life in the trenches World War I movie I've always wanted to see. I do want to see the 1970s version of Western Front. I've seen the silent version. That was great. But I can't recommend the book enough if you're into history, especially the First World War, and I can't recommend the movie enough. Watch this movie, get an understanding of what life in the trenches was. Get A plus movie. Now we're coming up on the 11-minute mark, so November 11th, 11th hour. I'm going to give a minute of silence for the lives lost in the World War. I'm not going to give the usual spiel. You know what YouTube likes you to do to these videos, so over and out. And yeah, I am using my phone again because I'm still learning the ins and outs of my camera, and apparently I need a microphone, but I'm getting there because this thing doesn't pick up sound the best, so over and out.